Hi everyone. I'm the director for our New Zealand registered not-for-profit charitable educational trust called Common Knowledge. I'm also a naturopath with 50 years of experience, and I had COVID in March of 2020 and have had symptoms off and on since then. And I decided that I wanted to become more public when COVID began to be a global phenomenon. I first became public around the work that our charitable trust does around pregnancy and childbirth. You can find our website, commonknowledgetrust.org, and our other website, birthingbetter.org. We put out a COVID quick birth skills course because pregnant women were being told that their partners couldn't be with them in the hospital or their doulas couldn't. And so we wanted to continue on our journey, which is to grow a skilled birthing population, which brings us to COVID. I have no medical training. I cannot prescribe, diagnose, or treat, and I chose not to do that because I didn't want people to confuse me with their doctors. It's really important to know that our trust advocates for a concept that you should use any and all health care that works for you. The only thing that I can give you is information about self-help. When you take care of yourself under the concept of every little bit helps, you help your doctor help you. And this is true with all ailments. And the medical profession wants you to help yourself. We often, as consumers, would like them to fix us, and so we're often not committed to self-help as much as we could be. And so with a lot of people having lingering symptoms, it became imperative for me to become more public through social media. So I want to talk to you today about breathlessness. Breathlessness is a common post-HAU symptom. And actually, a lot of people had breathlessness prior to this. It either arrived, we didn't recognize it, or it's gotten worse. I became a Buteco and Oxygen Advantage instructor many years ago because I had what was called exercise-induced asthma. I could go forever at a particular pace, but if I went up hills or got faster, I'd immediately have asthmatic breathing, and I wanted to change that. And as I studied Buteco, I realized that all of my breathing was dysfunctional. And Buteco was quite an amazing physician, and he was talking about things that other medical professions in his field were not discussing. And so he's developed a system in which we can really retrain the breathing center of our brain. With COVID, there appear to be two issues. The medical profession realizes it's not just a respiratory disease, it's a blood vessel disease. And some people are left with these white fibrous webs in their lungs, and others have micro blood clots. On the forums, people really talk about these things in some different ways, and I'm going to address them over a period of time. But today we're going to talk about breathlessness and what we can do for ourselves. Because if we can't do anything for ourselves, then we're stuck with hoping that the medical profession can save us, or we do nothing. And we can always do things for ourselves. And our whole life is composed of breathing in and breathing out. So from my experience, having changed my breathing, I can tell you that you can change yours over time. Does it take work? Of course it takes work. All of us thrive on being skilled. So doing work isn't really the issue. All of us work. We get out of bed and we work by putting on our clothes. It's a question of whether we want to do the work to be less breathless. Does it take time? Yes. Are there ups and downs of it? Of course there are. Should that stop us? That's your choice. So I want to talk to you about what happens to us when we're breathless. You can Google research this. I'm not a great researcher, and as I said, I intentionally don't want to be able to talk medicalese with you. I want to talk common knowledge with you. So when we are breathless, this does something in our body. It causes our sympathetic nervous system to become activated. And often when we read each other's long-haul symptoms, we can see this sympathetic nervous system in raging full glory. We feel stressed. Okay? We feel breathless. We often have an oppression in our chest that we're not getting enough air, and aching in our bodies and our limbs. The sympathetic nervous system is our fright, flight, fight, and freeze. So you can see how so many of us feel anxious. We don't know what to do. We're trying to escape this, and we feel absolutely paralyzed. That's our sympathetic nervous system. We get cold hands and cold feet. We get heart palpitations, stuffed nose, and feeling we're not getting enough air. When our sympathetic nervous system is active, it shuts down our cardiovascular system, and that's why we have these symptoms and we feel these ways. When our parasympathetic nervous system is activated, we get calm. We have warm hands and warm feet. Parasympathetic nervous system vasodilates. It dilates our blood vessels, and it dilates the little things in our lungs called alveoli. And it protects the lining of our 100,000 miles of blood vessels. It's called the endothelial cells. And it lowers our blood pressure. And it improves our digestion. So these are the things that we're aiming for. Long haulers are experiencing a lot of sympathetic nervous system responses. And that's why people are being put on medications for stress, which is fine. If that's what you want to do, our trust doesn't care. I don't care. It's your life. It's okay. And if you're doing that, you can also work on these things for yourself. Under the concept, every little bit helps. So there are two elements to activating the parasympathetic nervous system using Buteco breathing. By the way, there are lots of breathing techniques out there, lots of them. And included on this post are a link to two of them that I put out, that our trust put out on the COVID self-help guide that's in our earlier posts. I've been asked by the Facebook groups not to include it in each post, so you'll have to do a little research and find the first two posts and be able to download that self-help guide. I can't put it onto YouTube, so you're going to have to do a little bit of work. But with what I did in this was to take two of the links on that about breathing. They're very different. One is from UK nurses, which is strengthening your exhale by blowing slowly, and the other is a Shaolin ancient technique of exercising your lungs by doing stretches and stretches so that you exercise your lungs. Medical profession has realized this over time in this year with COVID, how important it is for people to exercise their lungs. And somewhere around May, which seems like forever ago, the medical profession started to realize that having people lie on their back in the hospital, depressed, actually compressed people's lungs. So they started to lie them on their stomach or lie them on their side so that their lungs had more space to inflate. All of these things are helpful for you. So let's talk about the two elements, and I'm going to show you some exercises of Buteco. So these other exercises are not Buteco. They're very good. How much do you need to do? Do whatever you can. The Buteco is changing the breathing center in your brain, which is back here. It is shifting your system from having a breathing sympathetic nervous system response to a breathing parasympathetic nervous system response. The two elements that get changed in your body by changing your breathing is, and this is where it gets a little bit technical medical, your carbon dioxide tolerance and nitric oxide production and distribution in your body. And all of us just go, ah, what's that? So for any of us who are old enough, remember when the Kenyan runners came down out of the mountains and just wiped everybody out on the track in the Olympics? It was because they live at high altitude. At high altitude, there is not as much oxygen. When there's not as much oxygen, our bodies develop what is called carbon dioxide tolerance. Now, I've had to sort of translate because I'm not great at understanding medical stuff at all. So I have to simplify things that I don't understand. So let me try to give this to you in a very simple way. And all of you who are medical out there, interpret it as you wish in your medical terms, and then you can clarify it to others. When we breathe in oxygen, the oxygen attaches to our red blood cells. That's our hemoglobin and our oxygen. The reason that I know something about this is because for 50 years I've been involved in pregnancy and childbirth. And our babies, when they're inside us, have what's called fetal hemoglobin, which means 2 oxygen molecules attached to 1 red blood cell. And that gives our baby an advantage. At birth, when the baby is coming through our body, the blood changes to adult hemoglobin. So I knew a little bit about it, but I didn't understand its importance in my breathing until I became a Buteco instructor. So, but this is going to make common sense. And I'm a director of a trust called Common Knowledge, so we look for common sense. So when the oxygen's in your bloodstream, it's not being used by our organs or our tissues in any way, or a little bit, of course it is. And it's being exchanged in our lungs to carbon dioxide, so we breathe out carbon dioxide and take in oxygen. But when we have a high tolerance for carbon dioxide in our system, that causes the oxygen to disassociate, in other words, break away from the red blood cells and go out into our organs and tissues. All of you athletes out there know what lactic acid buildup is. And if you're a runner, you know what rubbery legs are. That's because we don't have the sufficient oxygen moving out into our tissues and organs to feed them, so we get this lactic acid buildup. And when our diaphragm gets tight and we don't breathe well, then it robs blood and oxygen from our legs, and they feel weak. A lot of people with long haul talk about achy legs and achy feet. And this is going to be a side thing, so I'm going to pop this in now as a side thing. There are valves at where your legs meet your hips. The arteries go away from our heart, and the veins bring the blood back. Those valves can get a bit stuck. Some people have this as a symptom. We get just tired legs a lot of the time. But mentally, we can talk to our body. We can't always fix our body, but we can certainly talk to our body. There are many of us who go, I just need to relax. That's talking to our body. Or look over there. That's talking to our body. So you could try, just as I try when my legs get tired, when I'm walking or running, is I just say to those valves in the arteries, are you open? And then I say to the valves in the veins with the blood's coming back, are you open? And then I feel a little bit better. Real or imagined? Do I care? No, I don't. Right? I feel better. Do I have to prove it scientifically? No, I feel better. So it's important in self-help that if you feel better, that's good, right? That's just good. So, and that's an aside. So the parasympathetic nervous system opens up the blood vessels, all 100,000 miles of them. So when we have a higher CO2 tolerance, then we use our oxygen better. And the higher CO2 tolerance and using the oxygen better goes through our blood system and through our lungs and our heart, which is part of our respiratory and circulatory system. The other is nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is a very interesting gas. I knew nothing about it when I started with Buteco. And curiously, prior to that, I had watched a BBC program called Trust Me, I'm Your Doctor by Michael Morsley. And they were discussing skin cancer. Seems totally unrelated to nitric oxide, but this was my first introduction to it. If you ever see Trust Me, I'm Your Doctor, you know they do these informal experiments, and they also have a doctor who goes to a researcher, and that researcher was researching skin cancer. So he had human skin, exposing it to sunshine, and he said to the doctor who was interviewing him, see that white glowing layer under the skin? That is the development of nitric oxide. And I thought, what's nitric oxide, right? And he said, it's a primary vasodilator, dilates our blood vessels, and it stimulates our parasympathetic nervous system, and it protects our skin, and it lowers our blood pressure. And I thought, wow, what is that? How do you get that? But we all know how to get that in a lot of ways, because if we lie in the sun without sunscreen, and now doctors are advocating that 20 minutes in the sun without sunscreen, we get sleepy. And that sleepy relaxedness is the activation of our parasympathetic nervous system. See, it is all about common knowledge and how we apply this for ourselves. Okay. So, to develop carbon dioxide tolerance, we have to do something which is very counterintuitive, which is we need to have an exhale, and I'm going to repeat it again, exhale, breath hold, after a normal, not a deep, a normal inhale. Now, a lot of people in the COVID long-haul talk about stuffed noses. Our respiratory system starts with our nose, goes back in here, goes down here, goes in, spreads out through our lungs into our diaphragm, and then it pushes back up. So when we get a blocked nose, we have even a greater sense of feeling we're not getting enough air. So I'm going to teach you the first of the Buteco skills, which is unblock the nose. When you do this, you can do it lying down, sitting, standing, not walking until you get better at this. You want to do it 3 times, and you can do it as often as you'd like during the day, with one caveat. You absolutely must pay attention 20 minutes later as to whether you're breathing, your stuffed nose feels a bit better, which means you do it when your nose feels a bit stuffed. Yes, you can also do it if you're feeling about a bit breathless, because doing an exhale nose hold after a normal inhale is what is helping our body have greater CO2 tolerance. What does CO2 tolerance look like living a life? Most of us are not free divers, but free divers don't breathe for 6 to 10 minutes. They have high CO2 tolerance. If I get whopped on the side of the head and stop breathing, I have enough oxygen in my body for 4 to 5 minutes of not breathing without brain damage. For a newborn, as I said, I learned about this from working with pregnancy and childbirth, can be 15 to 20 minutes, even toddlers, without breathing, without brain damage, because they have a higher CO2 tolerance. Why? because babies are nose breathers. So one of the things you want to do, little at a time, is breathe in and out your nose more. But for people with stuffed noses, or people who have problems with their noses, they don't want to breathe in and out their nose. They mouth breathe. And mouth breathing stimulates the sympathetic nervous system. Nose breathing stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system. So this is how you do this exercise. You just take a normal breath in and slight exhale. You can pinch and rock. You can pinch and nod. This does not make the exercise more effective, just distracts you for a moment. Then, after you've pinched on exhale, you breathe in your nose. Why? Because this is where the nitric oxide is gathering. So you are both increasing your carbon dioxide tolerance and increasing the production and distribution of nitric oxide, which vasodilates, which stimulates your parasympathetic nervous system, which calms you down. I am going to do this twice so you see it fully. People will say, how long do I hold my nose? After you breathe in, you're breathing for 6 breath cycles, in, out, should be pretty normal. If you find yourself breathing in or more, you're holding it too long. This is subjective. You have to be subjective just as I had to be subjective. And we needed to do this so that our ability increased over time. A little by little, every little bit helps. So I'm going to do it as though I have very little CO2 tolerance. Okay? So a normal breath in. So you do not see my chest moving. You don't hear it. Let me do it as though you're breathless. Okay? People are going to do this. You don't want to do that. But if you find yourself doing, just correct. It's not a problem. Then when you breathe out, that means you've held it too long. Yes, this is subjective. Yes, it's easier to work one-on-one with people, but I'm working with all of you. Okay? So let's repeat it. Do not exaggerate your inhale. Exhale just a little bit. Hold it for as long as is comfortable. Inhale again because you're drawing the nitric oxide in, and intentionally do that. Take 6 breaths. Repeat it again. Do 3 times, and you can repeat it during the day. And what was the caveat? Do you remember that one? 20 minutes later, notice whether your nose feels less stuffed. Okay? Now comment, share this video. If you need me to do more of these, let me know. Now we're going to talk about nitric oxide production. Yes, sit out in the sun without sunscreen. Get sleepy. Breathe in through your nose the nitric oxide. It is dilating your blood vessels. It is dilating the alveoli in your lungs. It is dilating the blood vessels of your heart. It is also, nitric oxide is also helping to protect the endothelial cells in your blood vessels, which is what is being attacked by this virus. In this link is also, nope, I didn't put it in the link, sorry. You can also research Linus Pauling, Pauling. He was very well known, and he talks about this, and he talks about vitamin C, how important that is, and arginine, which is an amino acid. And I'll talk about some of these other things in another video because this one's getting a bit long. So the nitric oxide production comes from humming, and you can go on YouTube and find nitric oxide and humming. Some people hum here, so put the tongue on the roof of your mouth and push the hum up to here. Let it vibrate. Then breathe in, draw on the nitric oxide. Breathe out, humming. Breathe in the nitric oxide. Breathe in the nitric oxide. You can do this lying, sitting, standing, walking. That's fine. Not the unblock the nose. Don't walk with that one. Okay? You can do 5 minutes a day. You can do an hour a day. You can do 30 seconds a day, several times a day. Just keep humming. But remember, breathe in your nose. If you start to feel a tingling here, that's the nitric oxide. When you draw it in your nose, you're drawing it in so that it expands out into everything. When I do this, my hands warm up, my feet warms up, my chest warms up. This is the action of the nitric oxide in our systems. So I'm going to finish now because I've gone longer than I wanted to. So thank you very much for watching this. Don't hesitate to make comments, share, and let other people know. We need to help ourselves. We need to pass on common knowledge, and we need to use social media to be gracious with each other. So take care, and tomorrow I'm going to talk more about breathlessness.